There were 4 of us when we broke into the Megaplex. There was Ralph, better known as Razorgore on YouTube, and Dale, better known as Drakesong. The 2 of them often do head-to-head videos on YouTube, as well as Let's Plays and other game content where they played the latest video games and titles. Jeremy, Kyle, and I were just the editing team, but we appeared on the channel often enough to be recognized. I was operating the camera that night as we came up to the back door of the Megaplex, ducking under the police tape. "What's up, Gorehounds? Tonight we have something special for you," Ralph said, trying to keep his voice pitched low and failing. "As some of you may know, the Megaplex in our area was recently closed under some pretty creepy circumstances." Ralph pulled a goofy-looking face that was probably supposed to be creepy as he looked into the camera. Dale tried to stay in the shot, looking unimpressed and striving for that too cool for this look. Kyle and Jeremy stood outside the camera, Jeremy waiting for his cue and Kyle looking around nervously. Ralph had talked us into this, and all of us were having second thoughts now that we were here. The payoff would be spectacular, but the risks would definitely be high. "For those of you who don't know," Dale said, "last week an unknown man came in for the midnight showing of Silence of the Lambs and killed 8 patrons in the theater. Many of the others escaped, but when the cops burst in, he was nowhere to be found. The theater has been closed for 2 weeks now, with no sign of the murderer, so we figured it's the perfect place to break into and play some Dead by Daylight, maybe some Friday the 13th, as we all sit in the creepy theater, isolated in the darkness." We kept saying break-in because it sounded more dramatic. In reality, Jeremy worked for the Megaplex as an assistant manager, and he had keys. I kept the camera on Ralph and Dale as Jeremy approached the employee entrance with the crowbar, so the camera could easily see him as he passed. After some grunting and exertion off-screen, while Ralph and Dale hyped up the stream, Jeremy slid the key into the lock and unlocked it with one quick, smooth twist. He gave a mighty strain and pretended to wrench the door open as he turned the handle. I turned to look at the door as it came flying open, and the 2 congratulated him as we proceeded into the dark back room of the Megaplex. I had all 4 of our laptops in a bag around my back, and I tried not to bump them together as we walked inside. I would sit in the booth and monitor the stream, collecting the video and audio from the other sessions, and piece them together into something cool that we could post on our channels next week. The creepy ambience and gameplay would play well together. It would ensure that we had something awesome for maximum viewership. I could also monitor them from the central projection hub in case something went wrong. The theater was dark, the emergency exit signs glaring garishly at us as we walked through the snack bar and into the common area. The Megaplex had 12 different theaters and would allow each of us to sit in a different one without even having to leave our fingerprints in the theater that was also a crime scene. We had toyed with the idea of having all of them sit in there, basking in the atmosphere of death as they played killers and victims. But the idea of accidentally leaving evidence behind to incriminate ourselves was particularly unappealing. We were already taking a huge risk by doing this. Mitigating risk from herein was important. "Okay, we're going to set up now," Ralph said to the camera as he stood near the entrance to the theater hallway. "See you on the other side, Gorehounds," he intoned. I switched off the camera and put down the bag as I handed out the controllers. "Okay, here's your controllers. Take any theater but 7. Jeremy, show me which one of these keys gets me in the booth again." Jeremy flipped through them until he found a longish silver one, handing it to me. "This one, and the one next to it will get you into the projection cage. You know what you're doing up there, right?" he asked for the 1,000th time. "Hook the HDMI cables from the laptop to the projector. It's not rocket surgery, dude." "Please, for the love of God, don't unhook anything that's already hooked up to the projectors. Playing a pretty dangerous game here already, and I don't want anyone questioning why there are suddenly wires unplugged." "I think I can handle it, Jeremy. Now you guys go and get set up so we can get started." They went towards the theater, and I went towards the projection booth. 30 minutes later, we were ready to start streaming. The software on each laptop was easy to set up, and hooking the computers to the projector was easy. Each of their audio feeds let me hear what they were saying, and let them communicate with each other through the game software. They had taken theaters 5, 6, 8, and 9, leaving theater 7 empty between them. I couldn't help but glance down into the dark theater as I worked, my eyes straying to it ever so often. The lurid red exit signs were the only light in theater 7, casting the police tape and seats in an eerie crimson glow. I cut the screens on for 5, 6, 8, and 9, seeing the theaters light up as the screens flickered to life. When the screen for 7 came on too, I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I glanced out the little window that gave me a bird's eye view of the theater, and nearly dropped the laptop I'd been about to move. From my vantage point, I had a great view of the large black shape standing frozen in front of the screen. I backed away shakily, startled by the sudden appearance of the gangly shape, and bumped into the desk as I stumbled away from the frightening sight. I stood, breathing hard, as my mind raced and my brain ran over 1,000 different scenarios. Was it the killer? A cop doing some late-night investigation? A janitor? They weren't moving, so I had probably startled them as bad as they'd startled me. What if it was the killer? They had said they'd never left, hadn't they? My mind kept plodding over that little nugget as I stood motionless and felt my guts writhing in terror. I needed to get the audio feeds hooked up so I could warn them. I needed to call their cell phones so they could run. I needed to do something other than just stand here in abject terror, but that seemed to be all I was capable of doing. When he continued to stand motionless, however, I felt my fear ebb some and took another look. I realized my mistake pretty quick. The coat had clearly been left over a chair or something. The longer I looked at it, the more details became apparent, and the stranger it became that I couldn't see the arms or legs sticking out of it. I laughed when I realized I was frozen in fear by someone's leftover coat, and chalked it up to the creepy ambience of this abandoned theater. I was too jumpy. I had to keep my head in the game. I got back to work. "Mic 1, check," I asked, sitting down and testing the setup. "Check," said Ralph. I saw a little light come on in the seating area as his controller came on. "Mic 2, check." "Check," said Dale. "Mic 3, check." Nothing. "Mic 3, check," I asked, looking out into Theater 8. I didn't see anyone sitting in the dark rows of seats and started glancing around to see where Jeremy was. The screen was a solid, staticky white that covered the whole theater in a bright carpet of light. By that light, I could see nothing but an empty theater. This inevitably led my eyes over to Theater 7, and I had to double-take when I noticed something was amiss. I stood up, squinting at the chair someone had left on the little platform in front of the screen. The chair was bare now, just a silhouette behind the white screen. The coat was gone. "Sorry, Mic 3 here. I had to go to the bathroom." The coat had been there. I knew I had seen it. The ragged old coat had been sitting on a chair in front of the screen, a chair that was now empty. The hood had been up, making me think that someone had been inside it, the arms dangling out like empty scarecrows, and now it was just gone. The theater was still empty. I could see it illuminated by the screen, but the coat had vanished. "Hey, are you there? Control, come back." I shook it off and went back to my setup. "Check. Mic 4, check." "Check and check," Kyle said. I got back to the job at hand. I'd ponder that old coat and its escape act later. I would ponder that old coat a lot more than that in the coming days. I lined up their cameras so their fans could see and hear them, and then we officially started the stream. Our last stream, as it happens. "What's up, Gorehounds? I'm joined by Drake Song from channel Dragonhorn, as well as Kyle and Jeremy, regulars on the show. We're going to be playing some Dead by Daylight in the bowels of the murder megaplex." His head was little more than a ghostly floating specter as the camera picked it up and made him look a little ghoulish in the dim light. The screen became black as the game started. I watched as they rolled into the selection menu, the game divvying up teams and assigning the killer. I let my mind wander a bit as I monitored the stream. The boys were enjoying themselves, yelling and screaming whenever the killer would sneak up on them. They had played 3 games, Jeremy taking the killer role twice, when someone in the comments started trying to get my attention. This was pretty typical behavior. Most of these guys were attention whores, and they wanted to make the highlight reel at the end of the video where we showed great comments or funny moments. This guy, despite the ridicule he was getting from the others in the comments section, was not letting up, and that drew my attention. "There's a shadow behind Kyle," he said. Then a few minutes later, "Seriously, someone is sneaking up behind Kyle." 5 seconds after that, he posted, "Someone get Kyle's attention. Someone is coming up behind him." I looked at the camera feed, but saw nothing besides Kyle's face lit by the ghostly light of the movie screen. The game was the kind that favored a very muted color palette, and it had bathed the theater in a murky tone. I looked back to chat and saw that the guy was still yelling about someone coming up behind Kyle, telling him to watch out. I looked back at the feed and nearly fell out of my chair as a momentary flash of lightning in the game lit up the whole theater. I had seen someone poised behind him for a bare second, a black-clad figure in a long, ratty coat that I remembered all too well. I keyed up Kyle's mic and told him to watch out, but he didn't move. Instead, he just continued to look at the screen with that same frozen look of concentration he'd been wearing all night. Kyle had always had this intense look when he gamed, his expression somewhere between concentration and catatonia. I could see the silhouette of the man behind him, but it too was stationary and unmoving. When his feed cut out abruptly, I realized he'd been frozen for about 5 minutes. I looked out into the theater and could see Kyle still sitting there, head bent a little. His character was standing still. Ralph strolled by with the Reaper and killed him, dropping him with an easy swipe of his sickle. "Oh, tough break, Kyle. You hit a lag spike or something?" Kyle said nothing. I glanced out at the theater Ralph was in and saw that he was alone in the murky blackness. Ditto for Jeremy, and ditto for Dale. I assumed that the figure was still in the theater with Kyle, so maybe I had time to warn the others. It occurred to me that this might all be an elaborate prank, but surely they would have told me if it were, right? Otherwise, I might call the cops, which would draw attention to our stream and cause us to have to leave. I keyed up Ralph's mic so the others wouldn't hear me. "Ralph, we've got a problem." "What's up, homie?" Ralph asked, and I could hear the theater speakers booming in the background. "Something's going on. There's someone in the theater with Kyle, and now he won't respond. He hasn't moved his character, and I can't raise him on the headset. I think something's happened to him, but I need you to tell me if this is some kind of prank." Ralph was quiet for a second before chuckling kind of weirdly. "I don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about, homie, but if you're trying to run a prank here, it's not funny. It's creepy enough in this theater all by itself. I don't need to think about some creeper roaming around in the dark. Look, I'm telling you, this looks like..." But then I looked out into his theater and I felt my next words stolen from me. Someone was standing in the aisle a few feet from Ralph's seat. Someone who was holding a crowbar that was dripping wetly. "Ralph, behind you!" I yelled, but by the time he turned, it was too late. Ralph cringed against the seat in front of him as the hooded figure lunged with the upraised tool. I watched as his controller spilled to the floor, the assailant smashing him across the face with the dripping instrument. He rode him to the ground, Ralph looking dazed as he fell. The tool came up with each swing in a theatrical, horror movie fashion, sending out sprays of blood that coated the seats. The figure rose once he'd finished, and I could almost feel his eyes on me as he looked up to the projection booth. I backstepped to the computer and keyed up the other 2 mics. "Dale, Jeremy, you guys need to come to the projection booth right now." "Why?" Dale asked. Someone just killed Ralph." "What?" Jeremy asked, and I could hear him standing up. "He beat him to death with a crowbar. We need to get the hell out of here right now." "Agreed. Dale, you and I should head for the emergency exit in the theater while..." But there was a sound like someone tripping over carpet. I heard Jeremy's mic go dead, and a quick look showed me his feet being dragged behind a row of seats. I heard wind passing by Dale's mic as he ran for the exit. I could hear him hyperventilating a little, and as I watched, I could see him running for the glowing exit signs. I could also see the figure step out in front of him from a row of seats and bash him with the crowbar, knocking him sideways into the other row of seats. I backed away from the window then, starting to hyperventilate myself. This was crazy. How could they have gotten Dale and Jeremy at the same time? Was there more than one killer? How had they gotten this far? Had they been waiting for us this whole time? I shook myself out of my daze and decided that I needed to go. I looked at the equipment on the table and decided to leave it pretty quick. It would slow me down, and who really cared if the police found it? I was getting ready to report this the second I got outside anyway. I glanced through the projection hole one last time, checking to see if anyone was in the theater, and finding no one below. That was when something slammed into the projection room door, and I fell on my ass. I scuttled back against the wall, eyes glued to the door that was being violently rammed from the other side. Whatever it was slammed into the door a few more times before it rattled the handle and found it locked. I was suddenly glad I'd remembered to lock it, and I patted my pocket for my phone. I decided to go ahead and call the police. They could book me for trespassing right after they saved my life. It wasn't until I'd patted myself down a half a dozen times that I remembered I'd left it on the table next to the laptop. That was also when I realized that the banging had stopped. I crept on hands and knees towards the desk, praying the phone hadn't fallen. The silence was deafening in the wake of the explosive pounding. I kept glancing at the door as I crawled, expecting that any minute the door would burst open. I was afraid to look over the edge of the table, fumbling in vain as I tried to find my phone. That's when I heard a truly chilling noise, the last noise I ever expected to hear. The sound of keys being thrust into the lock, and the door being opened with a simple turn of the knob. I sat huddled beneath the table as a hooded figure wandered into the office. He was tall, his face hidden under the blackness of that dark covering. and his feet echoed off the floor as he stalked towards me. I tried to back up further. My back smashed the metal legs of the table as I came up short. I felt my legs tremble as I shook, and I closed my eyes as I expected to die very messily. I opened them again when I heard the laughter from the doorway as Ralph and Dale came through the door with their cameras in hand. "Oh man, we got you so good," Ralph laughed. "He bought it hook, line, and sinker," said Dale. "Another classic prank." I couldn't believe it. This had all been some stupid prank for their channel. I watched as the killer doubled over and started laughing too, his crowbar dropping with a plastic thunk to the ground. When the hood came down, I saw it was Titus, our sometimes roadie, when we took our shows on the road. Jeremy leaned in the doorway, laughing uproariously, as the others high-fived and congratulated themselves on scaring me half to death. I wanted to be mad, but I found myself laughing out of pure nervous relief. You jerks," I breathed, accepting Titus's offered hand. "You really scared the crap out of me." I slapped Titus on the shoulder. "How the hell did you get across 3 theaters in a matter of seconds anyway?" Titus looked confused at that. I didn't. I snuck into Ralph's theater through the fire door and waited for you to notice me. Then I ran out after you turned away, coming into Dale's theater and catching him as he tried to escape." "I pretended to drag myself behind the seats," Jeremy said. "And Kyle?" Titus was still laughing, but he looked a little confused. "What about him? We didn't even tell him about this prank. You know Kyle's a blabbermouth. He'd have never been able to pull this off." That made me pause for a minute. "Where is Kyle?" I asked, not seeing him and really being concerned about that for the first time. Ralph and Dale looked at each other. "Dunno. No way he's still in that theater." I looked down from the box, and sure enough, Kyle was still in the theater, unmoving and not playing the game. We tried to raise him through the mic again, to no avail, and after thumping on the glass window for a few minutes to get his attention, we decided to go see what was going on with him. The 5 of us came down the stairs and crept toward Kyle's theater. The door creaked ominously as Jeremy pushed it open, and I could see Kyle's head framed by the white screen as he sat upright, staring forward, and I moved inside to go see what was up with him. I came up behind him, pausing as I caught sight of something I hadn't seen before from my high vantage point. I didn't need to touch him to realize why he wasn't going to answer me, and they all drew close as I took a few balky steps back. There was a machete sticking through the back of the chair, pinning him to the seat. When the others saw him, they all started freaking out, talking all at once as we tried to figure out what to do next. Ralph wanted to call the police. Jeremy wanted to get the hell out of the theater and then call the police. Dale just wanted to be out of the theater. We all kept trying to talk over each other, our terror rising as we kept stepping on each other's conversation. That's why it took so long to realize that Titus was gone. We looked around for him, but no one could remember if he'd come into the theater with us. The last time anyone had seen him was in the projection booth. That seemed to be the deciding factor for Dale. He had his phone out, dialing 911 before anyone could say anything about it. Jeremy slapped it out of his hand, though, and the 2 of them stared at each other in surprise. Jeremy seemed as surprised by what he had done as Dale was to have his phone slapped away. It bounced under a nearby seat, and the 2 of them just stood silently for a few seconds before Dale asked him what the hell he thought he was doing. "I don't want to be involved with this. If you call the cops, I'm going to lose my job." "Screw your job," Dale yelled. "At least one person is dead." "Let's just leave first. We can get outside and then call them. You 2 can stay and say that this was your idea, and I can..." Dale was dropping to his hands and knees, looking for his phone under the seat. "Man, that's some cowardly shit. One of our friends is dead, and you're worried about losing your job. Man, I can't believe I ever..." His words were cut off, though, when someone drug him under the seat, and he started screaming. We scattered as Dale screamed, all 3 of us flying like quail, as we tried to put as much distance between ourselves and the killer as possible. I had my phone out as I left the theater, dialing the number for emergency services as I went. I vaulted the concession counter and hid behind it as the line buzzed and buzzed. I sat there shaking, the smell of old popcorn and aged soda in my nose as I waited for someone to pick up. 911, what is your emergency? I sighed, glad to hear someone outside of this place. I told them I was at the Megaplex and that I needed the police there immediately. I told them how we had used Jeremy's keys to get inside, how we were planning to set up a stream and play games in the creepy theater, how they had pulled a prank on me that had started all of this. I told her about Kyle and Titus and about all my friends who were probably being murdered right now that we had split up. and I told her once again that I needed help. I felt the tears roll down my face as I started to cry. She assured me that help was on the way, but that I needed to stay on the line. That was when someone kicked the counter from the other side, and I practically threw my phone in surprise. I could hear the lady on the other end calling my name, seeing if I was there, but my phone had landed against the opposite counter, and my attention was dominated by a hulking figure standing over me. The bar came up to his waist. The guy was nearly 7.5 feet tall and dressed in cast-off clothes and a long coat with a hood. He was holding the crowbar, his sightless face looking down at me, and then he smashed the crowbar against the glass, and I felt drops of something splatter across my face. I wiped them off and saw the red streaks on my fingers, realizing that his crowbar was splattered with blood. For a moment, we just stared at each other, his featureless face glowering at me. I couldn't see him glowering, but I could feel it as he glowered at me in disapproval. I had come into his den, his hunting ground, and now I was his prey. He turned, taking a step towards the opening that would let him behind the counter, and I weighed my escape options. I could try to vault the counter, but it seemed likely that he would catch me before I got to the door. If I sat right there, I'd get killed in short order, but if I sprinted for the area behind the concession stand, where the door was we'd come through, he might not be able to catch me in time. This seemed like my best course of action. He would likely still get me before I got to the door, but it was my only hope of escaping. The choice, however, was made for me. He had just stepped into the space between the counter and the back when the blue lights framed him up, and he looked at the big glass door in front of the building. He broke and ran for the back of the megaplex then, back towards the theaters, back towards whatever nest he had made for himself back there. The cops found me behind the counter a few minutes later. A search of the megaplex turned up the rest of my friends, or what was left of them at least. Each of them had been killed. They had been stabbed or bludgeoned or just strangled with the bare hands of that imposing shade. I was the only survivor, it seemed, and the police were very interested in getting my statement. That's why I'm here in this interrogation room, filling out this report. They haven't talked about criminal charges yet. I think they figure I've suffered enough. What they want is my complete report on the happenings of this evening. You can be certain that I'll never forget the events of tonight's stream. The last stream of my career, very likely. When the box arrived, Emily was thrilled. She'd been waiting for this particular package since March, and at long last it was here. Emily had been trying to get into one of these cold case box services for a while. Hunt-A-Killer, Cold Case, Sleuth Kings, she'd requested them all, but all Emily got back were apology letters and promises that they would contact her when they had room. The folks at Catch-A-Killer had placed her on their tentative waiting list, which sometimes took months, and she hadn't expected to be added to the list for quite some time. It was hard to get added. They only approved a few hundred people a year, and they were also one of the more popular groups. The service was their typical monthly subscription box, where they sent a cold case that the small group you found yourself to be a part of tried to solve. They would send clues a few at a time, a slow drip of evidence that would lead the group to the end conclusion, and they would follow the trail to a predictable end. As she brought the box inside, Emily felt giddy with anticipation. However, some of it was tempered when she stopped to look at the box. The label said "To Catch a Killer," but the address label was torn off, and the box looked a little bit funny. If this was their way of creating ambience, then Emily felt they'd done a great job. The box was battered and dirty, the clear tape around it looking thick and yellow, and the letters were pieced together out of newspaper clippings. It was a nice touch, if not a little cliché. The letter inside was no exception. The whole thing was made of magazine and newspaper letters, meticulously assembled by hand. At least, it appeared as such. Emily couldn't imagine how much time this had taken, whoever had put it together, especially if they had to build more than a few of them. Emily had to applaud their commitment, but it wasn't something that seemed feasible long term. She would be surprised if this level of detail persisted, and took the note out of the box so she could read it. This is the case of the West End Tooth Fairy. He has a kill count of around 26, and was most prominent between 2019 and 2022. His first victim was Miss Mary Klein, a retired teacher who lived alone. It took the police almost 4 years to place her as his victim, only then because his pattern began to surface. She was stabbed 15 times, most of them in the chest, and a smile was carved across her mouth from ear to ear. No forensic evidence was discovered at the scene, no sign of forced entry, and she was left in her favorite chair in the living room. No one was charged with her death, and only one item was ever reported missing from the victim: the bottom and top plate of her dentures. Emily read it over a few times, but couldn't figure out what she was supposed to be looking for. This was less of a case file and more of a story. Emily had read a few articles about how the information was disseminated, and then picked over by the community, but this read more like a creepypasta. She wondered if this might be one of those things where a group member got a different piece of the puzzle, but that was another point of confusion as she looked through the box. As she looked, Emily saw a plastic baggie with a pair of pliers inside. She took them out hesitantly, the red around the teeth of the pliers looking pretty convincing. Emily gave the box a once-over, finding them a pretty good prop for the price of the box service. Once the pliers and the note were out, though, the box was empty. There was no group code or information on getting up with the rest of your team, and after a thorough search, she found nothing. Emily shrugged, not too upset about it. They had probably just forgotten to add it, and she figured that a quick trip to the internet would get her in contact with her group. She was still excited about her quick admittance to the group, and hopped on the site to see what she could find. A little while later, Emily closed her laptop with a huff of frustration. She had checked every group, but no one was following the Tooth Fairy case. No one seemed to know what she was talking about either, and it was starting to make her wonder. Maybe the others would sign up soon. Maybe she had gotten her box a little too early. In the end, she set up a room for the Tooth Fairy case, figuring the others would find her, and decided to go to bed. She'd sign on tomorrow and find that they had discovered her, and then the game could begin. Instead, she woke up to find another dodgy package on her front porch, and only a few messages in the room she had started, none of them helpful. The people who had found the room appeared to have used her post as an excuse to belittle her. The 3 or 4 users who had left comments were quick to remark that the Tooth Fairy case was little more than an urban legend, not likely to be something Catch a Killer would tackle. They made fun of her for even suggesting that they received a case file on this one, and decided that she must be trolling. Today's box looked like it had gotten wet, and the cardboard was dark and distorted. Emily huffed and deleted their comments, setting the box on the table as she cleared her own inbox. This was what she got for asking for help on the internet. Most of these people were just shut-ins with little more to do than bother her, and she knew she shouldn't take it personally. Even so, Emily reflected that it was frustrating that none of the others who'd received the case files had hopped in to share information. As she sat grumbling at the computer screen, she found her eyes straying to the box and finally decided to open it. The material felt as damp as she'd expected, but that only added to the mystery. It hadn't rained last night, or for the last few days, and she couldn't believe that anyone would have delivered a package in such condition. And why was it here so early? It was near noon, but the mail didn't usually run until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. The box had been waiting for her when she opened the door, leading her to believe that it had been dropped off much earlier. Inside the box was another of those strange notes, the letter made of magazine clippings, and an envelope that she thought might contain pictures. His next victims were the Hughes children, Mary, Shelley, and Clark, ages 12, 10, and 8, respectively. Coming in through the window in their bedroom, he tied them up and made them watch as he stabbed them to death from oldest to youngest. Each of them was stabbed 20 to 30 times. Their parents found them the next morning, both having slept through the night as their children died mere feet away. The oldest child was found to have her lower canines removed, the middle child her bottom incisors, and the youngest was missing his bottom premolars. The teeth were believed to have been taken as a trophy, and that was when the police began calling him the Tooth Fairy. though the press wouldn't start using it until much later. As she took out the pictures, Emily felt her blood run cold as she flipped the top back. There were 12 pictures inside, all seemingly taken with a Polaroid camera. All of them were of crying children, their hands tied behind them and their mouths stuffed with whatever they had at hand. The girls appeared to be older than the brother, all of them bearing the same sandy hair and hazel eyes. And as the pictures carried on, Emily could see the fearful children becoming broken children. Their pajamas reddened, their wounds seeming to grow with each snapshot, and by the end, all three were lying on the carpet together. As their blood seeped into the thick shag, Emily felt the pictures slip from her numb fingers. What was this? It was a little too much if this was someone's idea of a joke or a game. She had wanted to be part of this game, but if this was the level they were playing at, she wasn't sure she was up to it. These Polaroids looked real, like something taken instead of made, and as Emily held them, they felt dirty in her hands. She put them in the box and picked up her computer as she tried to discover anything about the case that she was being drip-fed. This was the second box she'd received that felt more like a love letter to the killer and less like a case file. There were no clues to follow, no breadcrumbs to lead her to an outcome, just harrowing stories to listen to that ultimately didn't tell her anything. If this was how it was, she really needed to see if anyone else had received the clues she was failing to find. The forum offered more veiled insults, and Emily huffed as she closed the laptop. With no words from the admin and no help forthcoming from her fellow investigators, she couldn't do much but speculate. In the end, she dumped the contents of the box into the first one and threw the new box away. When her eyes kept darting over to it as it sat on the top layer of the garbage can, she pulled it out and took it to the outside garbage. She couldn't stand the way it seemed to be watching her, and as she came back up the front steps of the porch, she stopped in her tracks as she saw the last thing she expected to see. Another cardboard box, covered in old yellow tape, was on her welcome mat, sitting like a steaming pile of fresh foreboding. Emily looked around, suddenly not feeling so safe standing in front of her own house. How had she missed it? It hadn't just appeared between her leaving her front door and putting the box in the garbage can. It had taken a matter of minutes, 2 or 3 at the most, and someone would have had to place the box quickly and quietly in order to get it here in the interim. Someone like a serial killer who stole people's teeth and kept them as trophies. Emily shook the thought off and reached down to pick up the box. She must have just missed it on the way out, must have stepped right over it, but that didn't stop her from locking the deadbolt and throwing the chain across the door. She took the box to the dining room table, but it would be quite a while before she found the courage to open it. She looked at it as she cleaned her house, returning to it a few times throughout the day. She didn't want to open it, was honestly afraid of what might be in it, but it still hung over her like an omen. As fearful as she was, it was a very tantalizing mystery, and Emily loved a good mystery. As the sun went down and the shadows grew tall in her living room, Emily was helpless to stop herself from ripping off the tape. The box had the same wet, warped look the other one had borne, and as the tape came off, Emily was greeted by yet another handmade note and a long metal tool that made her grit her teeth. It was an ice pick, and someone had clearly used it roughly. The end was dented, the metal flowering up around the point of impact. The tip was malformed, that angry exclamation almost as damaged as the butt end, and it helped the red paint find its way into the porous metal that sought to drink it up. It worked its way into the crevices, and the dark red made the tool all the more grotesque. The fourth victim was Dr. Reynolds of the Norvis Free Clinic. Posing as a homeless man, He came in before operating hours and killed the good doctor before his staff could arrive. The Tooth Fairy had chosen Dr. Reynolds carefully, the two bearing a striking resemblance. It was easy for him to pose as Dr. Reynolds and continue to see patients. The next 12 victims were homeless people at the clinic, people he invited to come in after hours. The cause of death for all was the same as Dr. Reynolds, a single puncture wound to the side of the neck. From these victims, the Tooth Fairy completed his collection of bottom teeth. She added the pick to the box of other things before slipping it into the hall closet and going to sit in her room. Suddenly, the living room was a little too open, the windows too exposed for Emily's taste. She sat in bed, trying not to think about the boxes or the mystery that surrounded them. The more of them she received, the more she had to remind herself that this was just something cooked up by the company. It became harder and harder to justify to herself, though, as the contents became more graphic. She had read a lot of forum posts before signing up, and none of this seemed like the experiences she had read about. The cases were spooky sometimes, but there was always a group of people to help you solve them. Doing this alone was making her anxious, and the clues weren't really pointing her towards a suspect at all. This was reading more like a story, and less like a case. She wasn't sure what to take away from this, besides the crawling anxiety that surrounded her. She checked the group again, and found nothing but more people making fun of her for suggesting Catch a Killer would cover anything like the Tooth Fairy case. It's not even real. It's an urban legend. No, it's real, but the group only handles cases with suspects and evidence. The killer never leaves anything behind. The case is too high profile to let a bunch of amateurs mess it up by stepping on what little evidence they have. It was pages of stuff like that, but nothing helpful. None of the admins had posted either, and Emily supposed they were on vacation. They couldn't weigh in on forum topics, they couldn't answer her questions, and it seemed like they couldn't be bothered to do much at all. Emily set her phone on the nightstand and got ready for bed again, deciding that she wouldn't open any more of the packages until someone else messaged the group to say that they had received their packages. She needed help, she needed some perspective, and she wasn't going to get it in an echo chamber. As she fell asleep, she thought that at least it shouldn't be possible for them to send a fourth box so soon. It had probably been a fluke to send her 3 so close together, and she drifted off, hoping there might be someone to help her when the 4th arrived. She woke up the next morning to the sounds of birds and the gentle chime of her phone alarm. Emily felt a little better in the light of day, the megrims of the night before lost with the dawn filling her living room. She booted up her computer, intending to get some work done today before her boss called and complained about her lack of progress lately. First, however, she wanted breakfast. As the eggs and bacon sizzled in the pan, Emily felt all the anxiety of the night before dribbling away. She had made too much out of all this. She always psyched herself up so much over these things. Between the quarantine and working from home, she'd had too much time to mull over these dark corners. It might be time to get some of this under control. Maybe the box service was a little too much. She should cancel it and try again some other time. She had taken her phone out to do just that, her breakfast balanced on top of a cup of coffee, when something caught her eye in the peripheral. She was standing in the foyer, heading for the little office that she'd set up in the living room, when the spot found its way into her peripheral. She imagined that she could hear the tendons in her neck creaking as she turned her head to see if her fears were correct, and felt the plate wobble as the coffee shook in her hand. It couldn't be. It was 7 in the morning. The mail hadn't even thought about running yet. The package was sitting on the front porch, the center of her welcome mat, leering at her through the glass of the front door. She stood there for a count of 30, her mind whirling at the sight of the large brown box. But in the end, she didn't drop her food or dissolve into a puddle of terror. She turned away from the door and went to her desk, If she meant to continue buying box services, eggs, coffee, or paying the mortgage on her house, she needed to do some work. As she got to her tasks for the day, Emily found that her eyes just wouldn't stay off the package on the stoop. She couldn't see it from her desk. There was a wall in the way. But the mirror in the foyer gave her a perfect view of the front door. She had placed it there to see people when they came up. But now it appeared less than convenient. She tried to keep her mind on medical coding, but it was difficult with the non-existent eyes of the package on her. Her mind itched to see what was inside, little as she wanted to. It would be another horror show, she was certain, and it would be for her alone, since no one else seemed to be sharing it with her. Around 11, Emily finally sighed in frustration and pushed the keyboard away. She had done almost nothing in the 4 hours that she'd been working, and the sooner she got the package out of her mind, the better. She got up to go bring the package in, but as she moved into the foyer, she stopped again. There was a second package sitting in the shadow of the first. She stared at it, her mind reeling as she pondered how it had gotten there. She'd had a perfect view of the door. There was no way that anyone could have snuck up and delivered a package in broad daylight without her seeing them. She stepped towards the door, feeling the tug of curiosity, but stopped as she saw the obvious answer. The second box was a little smaller than the other one. In her apprehension at the sight of the box, she had just overlooked the second one. That was it, just a failure to notice. The thought made her feel secure enough to turn away from the door and go make some lunch. She was coming back with her sandwich and a fresh cup of coffee when she looked again and saw a third box perched on top of the first. She'd been thinking that she might be able to get some work done, but seeing that third box, that dark brown cardboard monstrosity, she began to doubt the web of excuses that she had crafted. If they could sneak in a third box, they could have easily slipped in the second. If it hadn't been there, they had slipped in while she wasn't looking and delivered it without a sound. She returned to her computer long enough to find the contact information to catch a killer and called their customer service line. This was getting out of hand, and if no one was going to return her messages, then she'd just go to the source. Mazer Incorporated, this is Janet speaking. How may I direct your call? Emily wet her lips, not expecting such a quick response. She plowed on before the anger could cool, though. Yes, I'm trying to reach someone with catch-a-killer box service. This was the number they had listed online, and I... But the bubbly woman on the other end cut her off. Of course, 1 moment, please. 30 seconds of canned music later, and another far too happy young woman picked up the phone and asked Emily how she could help her. Yeah, I recently signed up for your service, but I think something's wrong. I've received at least 6 packages in the last 3 days, and it's always at random times. I can't seem to find anyone online that's part of the same group as me, and I think I'm getting parts of cases that require other parts to solve. The level of detail is really impressive on the boxes, but the volume is a little creepy. I think I'd either like to be put in another group or just cancel the service altogether, please. The woman mm-hmmed and I seed through the whole conversation, and the background sound of keys clacking made Emily grit her teeth. I'm terribly sorry you're dissatisfied with our service, ma'am. You can absolutely have a refund, and I'll cancel your service. Feel free to keep the materials you've already received for your trouble. Do you know which case file you're assigned to? It's the Tooth Fairy case. The clicking abruptly stopped. You must be mistaken, ma'am. That's not a case we offer at this time. Not one we plan to offer in the future, either. Emily had been pacing, but stopped as the woman's words fell on her like a piano. That's the information I've been getting in the mail. All the boxes contain these little handmade letters and pictures and descriptions of murders. Let me get your information, ma'am. I'll see what group we have you assigned to. Emily gave her the info she'd filled in on the website, and after a few minutes of clicking, she could swear she heard the woman's teeth grinding together. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you aren't on our client list. You're on our tentative approval list, but we haven't taken your payment for the current cycle of case files. Emily stopped in the foyer, glancing fitfully out the front door as she tried to make sense of all of this. There was a fourth box on top of the other one, and as the golden afternoon set over the house, she felt a chill creep up her spine. "What does that mean?" she whispered, not daring to speak too loudly. "It means that whoever's sending you those packages isn't anyone from our office." Emily was speechless, and as the woman called to her from the other end of the phone, she let it slip out of her hand and tumble to the hardwood. Emily wanted to call the police, but her curiosity was piqued. It was the same curiosity that had led her to sign up for the service in the first place, but now it had led her into a mystery that she hadn't been prepared for. As she wrapped her hand around the doorknob, she knew that there was no going back. If she looked in those boxes, if she cut the tape and saw what lay inside, she'd never be able to go back again. She opened the door, poking her head out like a groundhog from his hole. She expected something to be waiting out there for her, but the porch was empty except for the boxes. She juggled the four of them into her arms and brought them inside, closing the door and twisting the deadbolt before taking them to her bedroom. She left the phone in the foyer, taking all the boxes and locking herself behind her bedroom door. Spilling them onto her bed, she wondered what order she would open them in. Looking at them again, though, she realized each was numbered with a quick squirt of magic marker. Taking the largest, the one with the childish 4 on it, she strained a little at the weight of it. Something rumbled angrily inside, and as she slid her penknife over the tape, she was unsurprised to find a roofing hammer inside. Like the chisel, the head was spattered with a deep red stain, and the tines on the end were likewise painted. What had the third box said? His victims had been killed by blunt force trauma to the base of the skull. After seeing the pictures of the children, she doubted he could contain himself from cutting and slicing them after the fact. He'd wanted to kill them quickly before they could give him away, but he still wanted the thrill of slicing them up. The note inside was quite illuminating. His next 3 victims were an odd fellow looking to have some teeth extracted, a census taker that he suspected might be working for the police, and the private detective that ultimately caused him to abandon the free clinic. The detective had a friend in the local police force, a friend whom he'd told before heading to investigate the rumors of missing people at the clinic. The tooth fairy avoided the raid meant to catch him and added 6 more teeth to his collection. From the old man, he took the front incisors. From the census taker, the 2 top incisors next to them. Finally, from the nosy investigator, he took the top canines and left on a bus as the police raided his hunting ground. She paused before opening the 5th. Had she heard a sound in the living room? She wanted to check, but the knife made such a satisfying sound on the tape as she opened it. Inside was a business card for someone named Carol Barner. The legend beneath proclaimed her to be a webmaster from Mazer Inc., and Emily suspected that she already knew what the note would tell her, how easy it had been for the packages to arrive at her house, almost like someone had her name and address. She thought again that she'd heard a noise from the living room, the breaking of glass or the crunch of a boot crushing something fragile. It might even been the breaking of a phone, as someone stepped on it after she'd carelessly left it in the foyer. She read the note quickly, wondering how much time she had left. His next victim was Carol Barner. Carol was selected at random, a crime of convenience that turned out to be very helpful. Carol was his neighbor, someone who worked from home as the pandemic raged. Carol liked to work late into the night, and her keyboard was so very loud. He had tried to be good, tried to lay low for a while as he settled into a new town, but the clack, clack, clacking was driving him mad. One night, as he watched 2 o'clock roll by with no reprieve, he took the continued noise as a sign from above. He broke into her apartment, and she never even noticed over the sound of her keyboard until it stopped tapping forever. In doing so, he discovered what it was she'd been working on, and found a way to finish his work without the hassle of finding more victims. He discovered the database that she'd been tapping away at, and after taking her premolars, he set to work. Her hands shook as she opened the next box, the knife threatening to cut her as it jittered over the adhesive. She could hear him as he moved through the house, being less than quiet as he yanked open doors and cabinets. He knew where she was. He had to, but it was all the thrill for him. He wanted her good and scared before he went about his business, and Emily had to still her hands as she read the note that lay atop the flyer for Catch a Killer. The flyer with the red stain distorting the K in killer and made it run like a wound. His next 8 victims were just everyday crime junkies, people who loved to research and speculate from the comfort of their home. He had a large pool to choose from, and it was easy to select those who wouldn't be missed or would take time to be discovered. Glenn Howell was a freelance coder with a passion for cold cases. Linda Merrill was a divorced housewife whose children had flown the nest, leaving her plenty of time to consume her true crime content. Courtney Powell and Linda Kane were roommates, and it was a wonder the 15 cats in their apartment hadn't got them before he did. John Boyd, Claire Keene, Reagan Summers, Casey Greer, they all took the bait and became true crime content all their own. Each kill swelled the legend of the Tooth Fairy. Each added another name to his tally, and each gave him another piece of the puzzle. As the police searched for him, looking for anything that could discover his identity, the Tooth Fairy found the last piece he needed, his final victim. The knob rattled, turning slowly as it hit the lock. Whoever was on the other side didn't kick, didn't yell, didn't fret. He knew they had all night. He knew she had nowhere to go, since there were no windows in her room, and there was no escape except through the door that he was now standing in front of. No one was going to come for her, and it was just the 2 of them until matters were resolved. He had to get inside anyway. Emily had all his tools. He had sent her everything he would need to make her another case file for some other true crime fan to speculate over. Would they wonder how she had been so easily caught? Would they question the validity of such a killer? Maybe the sheer idiocy of it all would help cement the legend of the Tooth Fairy into something told around campfires and under blankets as flashlights lit ghostly faces. Sometimes that was what really made the story, the idea that something like that could never happen to you. She opened the last box as he moved about her house like a fitful spirit, clearly savoring the moment. When she took the letter out, she yelped in surprise and let it fall to the floor. The last grisly totem fell to the carpet, clicking merrily as Emily watched it. It all made sense now. The name, the trophies, the order of the theft. He had needed them, needed to complete his masterpiece. He had to have a complete set, otherwise it wouldn't look right. She tore her eyes away from the grim spectacle and looked at the letter that was likely to tell her of his last victim. A victim she knew all too well. His last victim was Emily Colney. Emily fancied herself a true crime enthusiast. She petitioned multiple services since the beginning of the pandemic, but was never invited to join their groups. She wrote all of them in her application to catch a killer. And when it pinged on the database, the Tooth Fairy decided to make her dream come true and give her the true crime experience of a lifetime. Emily Colney, the perpetual shut-in on Hawthorne Street, would have the distinction of being the Tooth Fairy's last victim. After her, he would break his pattern, and thus become harder to link to the crimes that would come after her. So thank you, Emily. Thank you for helping me complete my masterpiece. The door shuddered, and Emily dropped the note. It fluttered down to land on the grisly trophy on the floor, and she was forced to put her hand far too close to it as she picked up the note. It was a mishmash, a golem, a creation of love and hate, and it hurt her to look at. It seemed that Mary's denture plates had been put to good use, and the teeth within them were as different as they were misshapen. He had lovingly set them into the plastic, and they looked like an animal trap, just waiting to bite. The false teeth were missing only one set, and as the door splintered, Emily grabbed the hammer she'd received the day before and held it at the ready. A hand slipped through the hole in the door, grasping the lock with a smooth and practiced twist as he opened the door and let himself in. She saw him then, rising to his full height as he filled her doorway like a ghoul in a cast-off coat. He was massive, his head looking grotesquely small as it peeked down from between his huge shoulders. She felt the hammer slip from her hand as the smell of him wafted over her, the aroma of dirt, campfires, old chemicals, and ancient blood. She didn't start screaming until he smiled at her, his spitty, toothless mouth revealing empty gums waiting for what lay on the floor between them, gums waiting for Emily to complete their reward for years of patience. When I was a little girl, I had a strange friend that I believed I had made up until about an hour ago. My father and mother were out of the house a lot when I was a kid. It never really occurred to me that we were poor, but looking back, I realized that we must have been. Mom worked 2 jobs, serving in a restaurant and driving a bus for the school. Dad worked in a fish market during the day, so he could attend school in the evenings. Both of them would come home every night, very late, and most of the time I was already in bed. They'd just flop down for a few hours before they had to get up and do it again. They were never cruel to us. They just didn't have time for my older brother and I. Mom and Dad got together in high school, and Mom's senior year photos show a swell of her belly as she carried my brother. They were parents before they were really more than kids themselves, and with no real skills, they had to take whatever jobs they could to keep food on the table. For the first 10 years of my life, there wasn't really a lot of happiness. There were no Christmas mornings, there weren't a lot of birthday presents, and I lacked the parental involvement that a lot of my peers seemed to have. That was probably what led me to create Mr. Gozo. My brother was supposed to be watching me after school. I've talked about my brother a little bit, but I don't think I've told you much about him, really. He was 8 years older than me, a senior in high school, who was supposed to be my caretaker while my parents were out of the house. This usually translated to him being in his room with the door closed, or him leaving the house and telling me not to answer the door or go outside. This meant that I spent a lot of time alone as a kid, but I much preferred the time when he left me alone. My brother was more than a neglectful babysitter. He could be really mean and seemed to delight in tormenting me. If he was gone, then it was just me and Mr. Gozo with the house to ourselves. Mr. Gozo was a friend that I discovered living in my house one day. He was tall, taller than my dad even, and had a strange, whispery voice that always used to make me laugh. He wore grown-up clothes, a long coat, and a pair of suit pants with square-toed cowboy boots sticking out from underneath them. His head was round and pale, his eyes always seemed a little too big for his face, and he didn't have any ears, which I found very funny as a kid. His smile was my favorite thing about him, because it reminded me of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. Something else about him that always reminded me of that cat was that he would disappear whenever anyone else was around. One minute we'd be having a tea party or playing hide and seek, and the next my brother would come home, and Mr. Gozo would just vanish. I told my parents about him, but they just smiled and said it was good that I had such an active imagination. My brother said I was a little freak and told me to stay out of his way. Mr. Gozo did not like my brother.
He is a brute. He knows nothing of imagination.
We played a lot, Gozo and I, but I remember his favorite game was hide and seek. He would never beat me, though. I was an excellent hider. He would clump around for a while before finally saying I'd won, and I would burst out and wrap my arms around his leg. Despite never winning, he always wanted to play. He seemed to like chasing me through the house, and when I think back on it these days, I see how lucky I was to never have learned anything to the contrary. You see, Mr. Gozo would always make these little bets before we started playing hide and seek.
If I can't find you, then I will get you whatever you desire. But if I win, then you must come back to my house to play.
Of course, I would always agree. I was 10 and very good at hiding. When I say he never found me, I mean he never found me. I would hide under things that were too hard for him to lift, or hide in places that were too small for him to get into. I would camouflage myself with blankets and pillows, and I could remain absolutely still and quiet for quite some time. Mr. Gozo would try his hardest, stomping around as his two big eyes roved everywhere. Eventually, he would just give up and tell me I had won. He always made good on his promises, too. I've watched Sailor Moon or Powerpuff Girls in the middle of the night long after Cartoon Network stopped showing cartoons, and I've eaten chocolate ice cream and pizza when we barely had groceries in the house. Much like Mr. Gozo, though, if my brother came home early, he couldn't see the food, or the show, or the new toy that Mr. Gozo had given me. I would turn back to find an empty plate or a staticky TV, and Mr. Gozo would be nowhere to be found. Mr. Gozo would play anything I wanted, but he asked to play hide and seek at least once a day. If I said I didn't want to, he never pushed the issue. He also never let losing deter him from playing. It appeared that whatever he wanted to do with me at his house could wait. He was a perfect companion for a lonely child, and I never saw his more sinister side until I looked back after the incident. Not until the hide and seek when I lost my brother. It was late, probably after 11 o'clock, and Mr. Gozo and I were playing hide and seek as we did most every day. I kept stumping him, even after hours of playing, but this looked like the time he was finally going to win. I was hiding beneath the couch cushions, compressing myself in a divot under the middle cushion where the springs were sagging. I could see him searching for me between the small gap in the cushions, and Mr. Gozo was looking desperately. He had lost 8 times in a row, and I could see that his patience was starting to deteriorate. He was pushing things aside, rustling the curtains, and pushing the pillows off the couch roughly as he searched for me. As the pillows hit the floor, I must have moved slightly, because he turned those much too expressive eyes back to the couch. They zeroed in on the cushion, and I knew that Gozo was about to win. He wrapped his long, sinuous fingers around the cushion, grinning as he prepared to lift it up. I tried to stifle a laugh as I prepared to be found. Just then, keys rattled in the door, and I saw Mr. Gozo turn his head to look. I looked too, and when I turned back, he was gone. My brother walked into the living room, and as I climbed out from under the couch, I could smell him before I saw him. He'd come home like this a few times, smelling sour and like the chemicals Mom kept under the sink, and he sighed in disgust as he looked at the house. I hadn't expected him to be back so soon, and Mr. Gozo had been a little rough in his searching the last few times. There were pillows and blankets on the ground, the curtains were open, and there were books scattered around, as well as magazines on the floor. The living room was a mess, and as I climbed from the couch, he asked me what the hell I had done. Nothing, I said timidly. Mr. Gozo and I were just playing hide and seek. My brother rolled his eyes. Mr. Gozo, Mr. Gozo, Mr. Gozo. He slurred the name as he said it, stumbling a little as he flopped onto the couch. I am so sick of hearing about that stupid freak. Clean up this crap before Mom and Dad get home, and yell at me for it. I started picking up, feeling him watching me as I moved around. He was acting weird, weirder than usual, and he was making me uncomfortable as he sat staring on the couch. I cleaned up the books, the magazines, put the blankets back on the quilt rack, and closed the curtains. As I went to put the pillows on the couch, I looked into his eyes and saw something I hadn't seen there before. It wasn't love. I knew what that looked like. but it was different from anything else I'd ever seen. I didn't like it, and when he caught my wrist and pulled me towards him, I squirmed and tried to get away. "Let go, you're hurting me," I said, trying to keep the whine out of my voice. If I whined, it would only egg him on. Don't be such a... He burped, and I could smell the pungent brew. "Such a party pooper. Come on and sit with your big brother." I struggled, pulling against him as he tried to pull me onto his lap. He was acting really weird, and my brain screamed at me that I did not want him to get his hands on me. I looked around, looking for Mr. Gozo for help, and saw him peeking from the hallway. His expressive face told me that he wanted to help, but he didn't know how. There seemed to be a sort of duality about him, a want to help his friends, but a knowledge that such a thing would be unwise. My brother swore at me, yanking on my arm and telling me to stop being such a cold bitch. Just like that bitch at the party," he mumbled, yanking hard and almost pulling me off my feet. Suddenly, though, I knew how I could get him to stop. There was a way that Gozo could help me. I can't play right now, big brother. I'm playing with Mr. Gozo. He'll get mad if we don't finish the game." I saw him sneer, but I also saw something else there. My brother pretended he wasn't a little weirded out by Mr. Gozo, but I could tell that the idea of an invisible friend kind of freaked him out. He had seen the pictures I drew of him, and I couldn't help but notice the shudder they elicited in him sometimes. When he was wobbly, like he was tonight, he was especially nervous about Mr. Gozo, and I decided to take advantage of that to get away. "You played with him long enough," he said, his grip tightening. Why don't you come play in my room? I've got some new games I want to show you." I shook my head. "Mr. Gozo will get mad. I have to finish my game." I turned back to the hallway and saw him shaking his head, begging me not to go on, but I pressed my luck. "But, if you play with us and finish the game, then I'd be done and we could, play, I guess." I tried to stay calm, but his touch was making me nervous, his sweaty hands making my skin crawl. My brother looked thoughtful for a moment and let my arm slip out of his hand. "Okay, one more game with Mr. Gozo, and then it's our turn to play, right?" His smile made me want to run out into the night and never come back. Right. You hide, and I'll hide, while Mr. Gozo counts. Go hide so he doesn't find you." My brother got up, wobbling a little, and went down the hall. I turned to go hide too, and that's when I heard Mr. Gozo's voice. Please don't do this. You could just come with me. He can't hurt you where we're going." I turned around and saw Mr. Gozo towering over me, his eyes looking sorrowful as his mouth held in a frown. "Count to 100, Mr. Gozo. If you find me first, I'll go with you, but if you find him first, he has to go with you." We looked at each other for a count of 10 before he put his hands over his eyes, and I ran off to hide. I went in the kitchen, having a perfect place in mind, as I heard Mr. Gozo's count reach 15. I opened the cabinet beneath the sink and squeezed in, not sure if I would still fit. I had found this spot a while ago, seeing the small space beside it once you were under the sink, and marked it for future use. I knew it would be too small for Mr. Gozo, or my brother, to squeeze into, and they would have a hard time seeing me in the little space between the drawers and the wall. I squeezed in there, pulling the drawers back in as I inadvertently nudged them, and pressed myself as flat as I could against the wall. Even if my brother got bored and came to find me, he'd never find me here. I breathed very shallowly and stifled my gasp as I heard Gozo's count reach 100. Then, the game began. It started out normally, Gozo seeking and me hiding. He checked beneath things, he checked under things, but the gravity of the game began to shift very quickly. Gone was the playful talk as he tried to find me. Gone was the playful way he looked. Now he was shoving things over, pushing them around, and it sounded like he was tearing the house apart. He moved into the kitchen, glasses breaking and things on the counter being pushed onto the floor. This wasn't like him. Why was he acting like this? I shivered in my hiding place, waiting to be found or for him to move on. I heard the table flip over, the face of the microwave shatter as it hit the ground, and the floor groan as the refrigerator was pushed over, its guts spilling everywhere. Mr. Gozo called my name, his normally happy voice cracking with sorrow and anger. I wanted to go to him then, wanted to wrap my arms around him and comfort my old friend, but I didn't dare leave my cubby. I would stay hidden all night if I needed to. A part of me now feared Gozo as much as I feared my brother.
Come out! Come out! It's not too late. You can still...
What in the hell is going on in here? I heard my brother yelling, could almost picture him in the doorway to the kitchen, and I eased out of the cubby and moved a shaky hand towards the door of the cabinet. I heard Gozo's heavy boots as he stepped towards him, my brother asking who he was and what the hell he was doing in our house. He was slurring and shouting. Mr. Gozo was silent as the grave as he walked towards him. I pushed the corner of the cabinet open, just a little bit, and looked out of the crack, seeing the two long legs as they walked towards my suddenly scared brother. I was looking between his ankles as he walked. He had been so close to my hiding place that he might have heard the silverware shivering in the drawers if I had started shaking any harder.
My name is Mr. Gozo, and I believe that you have been found.
My brother screamed as Mr. Gozo blocked him from sight, and I pulled myself back into the cubby and sat shuddering as he went right on yelling in terror. I stayed there until my parents came home an hour later and called the police. They had many questions, the police and my parents. I told them that I'd been playing with Mr. Gozo when my brother had come home. He was acting weird, so I said he should play hide and seek with us, so I could hide from him. He was trying to get me to do things that made me feel weird, so I hid, and then Mr. Gozo had wrecked the house looking for him. When my brother came to see what all the noise was about, Mr. Gozo had taken him away, and I had hidden in my spot while he screamed. The police officer didn't understand what I was talking about with all the Mr. Gozo stuff, but when he asked my parents if they had a son, they just shook their head. No, she's always been an only child. I could have sworn we called a sitter for her since we knew we wouldn't be home till late. Didn't you hire a sitter? Dad asked Mom. Mom just shook her head. I thought you had. They both, however, had this dreamy look on their face, confusion mixed with embarrassment, like when you walk into a room and forget why you came there. It probably seems weird to you that I keep calling my brother by his title and not his name. It's because, as I saw my parents looking so confused, I realized that I didn't know his name either. I remembered that I'd had a brother, in that vague way that you remember that when you were 6 you had a pet, but not exactly what happened to it. But I couldn't remember his name. He was gone from all the family photos. His name was gone from any journal entry or class assignment I had wrote on it, and no one remembered him at all. It was as though he never existed, and even now, I can't remember what he looks like or what his voice sounded like. I only remember that he existed, and he's gone. I wonder often if that's what happened when Mr. Gozo caught you. The police had a lot of questions after that, and it was finally agreed upon that I had been the victim of a break-in and hidden from the intruders. They hadn't found me, so they had left after a while, and I was extremely lucky, they said. The police agreed to check the house, but found nothing. My parents said they would check their valuables, but never reported anything missing. Mr. Gozo had only taken one thing, and they couldn't remember that it had even existed to start with. They sent me to bed, telling me to get some sleep while they cleaned up the mess, and that's when I saw Mr. Gozo for the last time. I was lying in bed that night, listening to my parents talk about how they needed to be more careful about leaving someone here with me, when I suddenly felt his eyes on me. I rolled over to see his sad face, his heavy eyes full of sorrow, and his too big mouth turned down into a frown. I also saw the speckles of blood on his normally so clean coat, and the small, hesitant smile lying just below the surface as he gauged my reaction to him. Go away, Mr. Gozo. I don't want to play with you anymore.
I made him go away. I made him stop hurting you. I showed you what I was so you could be safe, and now you want me gone?
I rolled over, looking at him and yelling, Go away, Gozo!
Say it again. Say it thrice, and I'll never darken your door again.
Go away, Gozo, I almost whispered, hearing my parents stop talking downstairs. He evaporated like a fine mist, and I never saw him again. Well, until today. I'm a grown-up now, married with a girl of my own, and I haven't thought about Mr. Gozo until just a few hours ago. I was putting away laundry when I found my 4-year-old hiding in the towel closet. Emily apparently got her father's hiding genes, because a blind man could have found her hiding under that pile of towels. She squealed as I found her, but then looked grumpy and told me to close the door before he found her. "Who?" I asked, smiling at her as I lifted her into my arms. "Mr. Gozo," Emily said, and my blood ran cold. She took me to her room when I asked who that was and showed me pictures. He wears the same long coat, the same straight black pants. She even drew the square-toed boots that stick out from beneath them. She captured his face in a way that I never could have as a child. His pale oval face, his almost cartoonishly large eyes, his smiling mouth of pointed teeth, and his distinct lack of ears. His head is still shaved, but she's drawn him with a large top hat, an eye floating in its middle. The eye is blue. Were my brother's eyes maybe blue? She's in my room now, with me, whining because she can't finish her game with Mr. Gozo. Sometimes I feel like I can see him out of the corner of my eye as I write this, his wide smile predatory. I don't know what to do. I can see Emily talking to him in the mirror, his 2 large forms sitting on the bed as he listens to her. Every now and again, though, I see those 2 big eyes of his glance over at me, knowing me and seeing me for who I am. I want to take my daughter and run, but I don't know how he will react to such a move. Perhaps I can offer him one last game. Perhaps I can finally give him what he always wanted. Perhaps I can save my daughter, as my big brother inadvertently saved me all those years ago. I have to try, don't I?
Good evening, my little creeperonis. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. It's time once again to thank our patrons. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle for being our spooky skeleton tier contributor. Thanks, Leslie. We just couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to be one of our contributors, come on down to Patreon. We've got plenty of tiers. I'm sure there's one that'll suit you. And as always, you can always pick up a book on Amazon. I have 4 now. Might I suggest Stragview Stories? It's a collection of prison short stories that I think are pretty good. Considering that I spent 4 years working in a prison, I've got a lot of technical know-how about how spooky prisons can be. And as always, I hope you'll join us next time for more stories. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.
I was looking for something to make my end of summer sleepover amazing. What I got was a sleepover that no one would ever forget. Margot, Jenny, and I had been friends for years, since kindergarten even, and we were getting ready to start 7th grade in a few days and wanted to hold our annual slumber party. I had the pigs in a blanket, the chips that Margot liked, the sour gummy worms for Jenny, and a huge bottle of Dr. Fizz for us to share. I was getting the movies ready when I realized I hadn't found our favorite game yet, and started hunting through the closet. We had played Mall Madness, a game my mom had given me from when she was young, and it was a hit at any sleepover. We would shop till we drop, charge it up, and then laugh about who had the best deals and spent the least amount of money. It was great. I had probably replaced the batteries in it a dozen or more times, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. I had always put it at the top of my closet, right beside my old Barbie travel case, but today it was nowhere to be found. I blew out in exasperation, wondering where it could be, but ultimately decided to go check the attic. The game had come from the attic after all, so maybe Mom had put it back up there. I pulled down the ladder, glad it was still daylight so it didn't look so spooky up there, and went to go look for Mall Madness. It was kind of a chore because Mom is something of a hoarder. Dad calls her a pack rat, and it seems pretty fitting. She keeps everything. She had clothes from when my sister and I were little. She's got art projects from when she was in school up there. And she had boxes and boxes of old photos and memory books, all kinds of things. I pushed aside a bunch of dresses and found an area dominated by old toys and games that she had saved. It was a mishmash of dolls and books and some old doll houses and a couple of dusty board games. I didn't find Mall Madness, but I found about 7 others. Apples to Apples was for babies, and Uncle Wiggily looked kind of weird. Don't Wake Daddy was missing pieces, some of which I'd lost, and Monopoly was just too long. I was about to give up when I saw a black box at the bottom of the stack that I didn't think I'd ever seen before. It was covered in dust, the letters barely visible, and I pulled it down, tugging it quickly so the other boxes wouldn't fall. I wiped off the cover and read the red lettering on it slowly, the red and black hard to read since it was so faded. Mystery Man, the name proclaimed, and I was about to open it and see the instructions when my mom called and let me know that my friends were here, so I ran downstairs to see them. I tossed the game onto my bed as I ran past, figuring we would check it out later, and we were soon all laughing and jumping as we got excited about the night. We ate dinner, we played hide and seek in the backyard, we hung out in my treehouse, and as it started to get dark, we came in to watch movies, play games, and start the rest of the evening's activities. Dad works nights, and Mom didn't really ever make us go to bed when we were having a sleepover. We usually passed out sometime around midnight, but tonight we wanted to stay up till we heard my dad pull in from work. We wanted to see if we could stay up till dawn, just to see if we could, and we had enough snacks and sugar to manage it, we thought. By 11:30, we had watched 2 movies, eaten most of the snacks, and drank half a bottle of soda, as we braided each other's hair during the end part of Balto. We were a little bored with movies, and Jenny asked if we could play Mall Madness for a little bit. That was when I remembered the game and told them I had something different in mind tonight. The game had worked its way half under my pillow somehow, and when I pulled it out, my friends oohed and awed at it appreciatively. We opened the box and found a black board with silver spaces, the big orange phone in the middle having an honest-to-God spin dial on it. We had cards with descriptions on them, and it felt more like we were assembling a police sketch than a dream date. We would go around the board, landing on spaces and drawing cards, and when someone found a card with a number on it, we would dial the number, and it would help us determine the identity of our mystery man. "So it's a little like Dream Date then," Margot said. "Seems weird," Jenny said, "like we're hunting him or something." I looked at the instructions, but they gave no particular instruction on the purpose for making a description of the guy. We would take turns until we had assembled our mystery man, and then we would call 000 on the phone and give our description to the person on the other end. Somehow, they would know if it was right or not, and tell us that we had won, or tell us to try again. "Simple enough," I said, and I picked up the dice and rolled first. It was about 4 turns later when Jenny landed on a card that gave her a phone call. She dialed the number, but she was having some trouble until I showed her how the rotary phone worked. Mom had showed me, saying that was how they used to call people 1,000,000 years ago, and once she got the number plugged in, she held the phone against her head and waited for the click. Someone came on after 3 rings, a weird staticky voice that I didn't much like, and whatever it told Jenny, she didn't seem to like it either. After a few minutes, she put the phone down, her hands shaking a little. "Well, what did it say?" Margot asked. Jenny cleared her throat, trying again to get control. I'm not supposed to tell anyone. The phone man said the call was just for me." She handed me the dice, her hands very sweaty and a little shaky, and we continued. It was my turn to use the phone next, but Margot pulled out a card and laid it down. The card let her steal my phone call, and I laughed a little as I stuck my tongue out at her. She dialed the number and held the phone, interested to hear what was to come. None of us thought it was real. Well, Margot and I didn't, but Jenny scooted a little away as she made her call. The voice picked up, and something quick and harsh made Margot's smile slip off her face as she listened. Her lips trembled as she put the phone down, and she wrote something on a piece of paper and shook her head when I tried to pass her the dice. The guy on the phone said to let you roll again. He said some other stuff, but I'm not supposed to say. I rolled again and grumbled as I landed just shy of a phone space. I wanted to hear what had them so spooked. This was a board game, ages 10 and up and all that, and there was no way it could be that terrifying. We continued taking turns, the girls wanting to keep playing, despite their obvious discomfort. Finally, I got my wish. I drew a card after landing on a spot, and it was a phone booth. Searched the deck for a phone card and dialed the number. I took the first one I found and dialed the number, letting it ring 5 times before someone picked up.
Mystery man is blonde, about 6 feet tall, and a wide-brimmed hat. That's for your ears only, Toots. So don't tell any of those other little bitches what I said. I'll know.
That was a little weird, and I put the phone down with some hesitation. I didn't think they could say things like that in a board game like this. Margot and Jenny didn't bother to ask what he'd said, and I made notes as Margot took her turn. I had a blonde card and a wide-brimmed hat card, but I didn't have one that said 6 feet tall. I guessed I'd have to draw for it. Meanwhile, Margot had gotten another phone call, and as she listened, I saw her glance over at Jenny, and the look wasn't friendly. I didn't know what the phone guy was telling her, but it seemed to be making her mad. We played the game for hours, and in that time, the game got worse and worse. Anytime Jenny got a phone call, it nearly put her into tears. Anytime Margot got a phone call, it seemed to make her angrier and angrier. I tried to take the phone from Jenny at one point, offering to take the call for her, but she shook her head and told me the phone man had said that she had to take it, whether she liked it or not. Yeah, Margot said, her eyes looking mean. She needs to take her calls, just like the rest of us. As the game went on, we got more clues. I learned that my mystery man was a 6-foot-tall blonde in a wide-brimmed hat with a mustache, black pants, and a white shirt. I had most of that, but I was still missing the 6 feet tall with a mustache card. The man on the phone had alluded to the fact that Margot would soon make her move against Jenny, the two being like dogs ready to fight. And when Margot threw down a card, it looked more like a knife toss than a friendly showing. White glove. I get to take one of your cards, Jenny. Jenny nodded, holding her cards out like a fan, and Margot picked the 4th one, pulling it back smugly before glowering at it. You switched it, she accused, flipping it around to show Jenny a green sweater card. Jenny shook her head. Nuh-uh. Yes, you did, Margot accused. The phone man said you were a cheater, but I didn't want to believe it at first. Looks like he was right. I never cheated, Jenny said, almost crying. Then why wasn't this a green scarf card? The phone guy... But she brought her teeth together hard, and it sounded like wood clacking together. What? I asked. What did he say? Nothing, Margot said. Doesn't matter. Just play the game. Jenny didn't look like she wanted to keep playing the game, but she didn't look like she was capable of stopping either. The game would continue, whether we wanted it to or not. And after that, the phone calls got even weirder. I pulled a card, dialed a number, and was greeted with about 10 seconds of heavy breathing before he spoke.
The mystery man has a long, sharp knife. He's walking down the street. Turn left on Martin Drive. I'll soon be there.
That sent chills through me. Martin Drive was 2 streets away. That was like an easy 20-minute walk. What the heck was this? These weren't pre-recordings. This had to be live, but that was impossible. The game was probably 20 years old at least. It couldn't happen. Look, I said, hanging up the phone, let's just call it a draw. I think this is getting a little too real, and... The orange phone rang, and I felt my words wither in my mouth as we just sat there and looked at it. It was like watching a bomb tick down, none of us wanting to be the one to touch it. It just kept ringing and ringing, and finally, to my surprise, Jenny reached out to pick it up. Her hands shook, her breath coming in quick gasps. She lifted it to her ear, and I heard someone snarl something as she winced like she'd been struck. She held the phone out for me, hands moving like someone with nerve damage, and said it was for me. I took it and held it to my ear and said hello.
Whether you play the game or not, you little bitch, the mystery man is still coming. If none of you wins, then he's coming to get all of you. But if one of you manages to win, then they might be safe. You never know. Better finish what you started.
I hung up the phone, trying to keep my teeth from chattering as I told them what he'd said. That's not true, Margot said. The phone guy told me that I had to beat Jenny, or I'd get taken. He said Jenny was trying to win on purpose so the mystery man would get me. Jenny burst into tears. He said that you two were trying to sacrifice me to the mystery man and that I deserved it. He said I was useless, just holding you two back, and I deserved to get dragged away. I thought about it, weighing what he had said. Sounds like if we all win, then he can't get at any of us. We have to work together to get out of this. Jenny shook her head. He said if I told you what my mystery man looked like, that he'd get me for sure. Me too, Margot said, the anger slowly turning into fear. Well, who cares what he said? He's coming regardless, so we have to do something. So we played the game cooperatively. Helping each other proved a better strategy, and Margot soon had everything for her mystery man. Margot dialed 000 and declared that her mystery man was 5'4" and bald, with a hockey mask and a machete and a white jumpsuit. The voice came from the rotary, making us all jump with its suddenness as it reverberated around the room.
You have discovered your mystery man, Margot. You are safe for now.
We were still for a moment. Then Jenny reluctantly picked up the dice and kept playing. She got a card, dialed the number, and choked out a sob as the man on the phone told her about her mystery man. He's on your street, she said, sobbing a little, and I rolled the dice so we could get to her turn again. White glove, I said. Let me see 'em. Jenny held up her cards, but she started nodding at one that was 5 into the stack. I drew it, and sure enough, it was the mustache. Now all I needed was the 6 foot tall and the knife. Jenny went again, drew a card, and breathed a sigh of relief as she dialed 000. My mystery man is 6 feet tall, dark-haired, with a rope and a long coat. The phone made the sound again before declaring,
Jenny, you have discovered your mystery man. You are safe. For now.
I picked up the dice when I heard something creak the door downstairs. It was long and loud, like a funhouse door at the carnival. I tossed the dice, moved my piece, and drew a card. It was a phone call, and I threw it away and rolled again. I moved, drew, and pumped my fist as I got the 6 foot card. I was rolling again when the phone began to ring. I let it ring, rolling and moving like a madman. I drew, but it wasn't what I needed. I got another phone card and threw it away. I could hear my mystery man on the stairs, moving as slow as any horror movie villain. I drew the gun and cursed as I tossed it away. I drew another white glove card, but I tossed it and kept rolling and moving. I could hear him on the stairs, his boots clumping menacingly. I had to find the knife. I had to banish the mystery man. If I didn't, it would mean my death. He came onto the landing when the ringing phone became too much, and I picked it up and put it down again. It started to ring after a few seconds, and I did it again before moving my piece. I could still hear his boots in the hallway that led to my room, and they grew louder by the second. Ginny and Margot were watching the door to my bedroom like it might explode, but I was focused on the task. Rope, toss. A wide-brimmed hat, toss. He was walking past my little sister's room now. He'd pass Mom and Dad's room after that, and then it would be down to my room at the end of the hall. What would happen if he got to me? Would they even believe Margot and Ginny? Would the mystery man leave them alone once he'd got me? I didn't know, but my heart leapt into my throat. I'd drawn the knife. I was done. I dialed 000 as soon as the door opened to my room. Ginny and Margot gasped, sliding away from the board and as far from the door as they could get. My mystery man has blonde hair, a wide-brimmed hat, is 6 feet tall, has black pants, a white shirt, and a knife. I practically screamed it into the phone, falling forward to cover it as I expected that long, sharp knife to stab into me at any minute. I heard the tone, and then heard the phone crackle again.
That was a close one, Heather. You're safe from your mystery man. For now.
I just lay there for a while, panting and trembling, as Margot and Ginny came to comfort me. They told me they had seen him standing in the doorway, his blonde hair spilling beneath his hat, and a sharp knife in his hand. He had raised it, took a single step, and then just disappeared into nothingness. We lay there, just kind of basking in the feeling of being alive, until I heard my dad pulling into the driveway. We had made it. We stayed up until sunrise, just like we wanted to. I went down and hugged my dad, who seemed surprised that I was still awake, but glad to see me, and then the three of us turned in. I put Mystery Man back in the attic, and have never touched it again. One brush with death was enough for me. So if you find a copy of your own while trolling through the thrift stores and antique malls in your area, be very careful with it. The mystery man you find might not be a mystery for very long.
Hey, folks, and welcome to the show. It's ya dude, the unconquerable Wafflesaurus gamer. Today, I've got a real treat for you. As far as jobs go, flying free to Japan to edit footage was pretty good. I'd been the other half of my best friend's YouTube channel for nearly 2 years now, his dedicated editor and sometimes cameraman when the need arose. Travis, or Wafflesaurus Gamer, as he was known on YouTube, had a fairly popular Let's Play channel, in which he played everything from the shiniest new games to the oldest retro titles to the most ghastly train wrecks the internet has to offer. He had a modest fan base that seemed to like his Logan Paul-esque style, and the guests he had from time to time were entertaining enough to hold the attention of an 8 to 25-year-old demographic. 2 weeks ago, though, someone had sent him a weird one. The guy claimed to be from the outskirts of Japan, said he and his brother had gone to a game parlor with a reputation for obscure titles. They had gone to play a game that had been stirring up rumors in their little town, a game called Your Corner of Hell. The writer said very little was known about the game, but some kids in the village were supposed to have gone crazy or killed themselves because of the things they had seen in the game.
The two had, of course, wanted to play this mysterious game. The owner had heard their request, money had changed hands, and the guy and his brother had been invited to the back of the arcade to play the game. The older brother had gone first. The room had a one-occupant rule, and the younger brother waited for a while his brother played for what seemed like hours. We went into the arcade at 10:30, just as they opened, but my brother didn't come out of that room until well past dark. The younger brother had sat for around an hour before boredom brought him back into the arcade. I spent several hours playing the machines, down to the lint in my pockets, and still he hadn't come out. As the sun went down, he heard a commotion near the front. The owner was carrying someone over his shoulder and shouting at the younger brother to get lost. The owner shoved him from behind, his meaty hand moving him easily. When the younger brother was on the sidewalk, the owner had tossed the thing that he'd been carrying onto the pavement and shuttered his shop up for the night. The thing he had been carrying turned out to be the boy's older brother. He was unconscious. The doctors say he's in some kind of coma and he may never recover. The owner denied that he'd ever even seen us, of course, and he has some kind of connections that keep the police from investigating him too closely. I know you play weird games, and I hate to bring you into something like this, but could you please go and try to find this game? The man at the parlor will let you in the back if you tell him Lilith sent you. Please, if you can find out what my brother saw, maybe they can help him. And now, here we were, standing outside the shabby arcade. We had flown into Hiroshima and taken a train out to the town of Tomanoru so we could meet the younger brother, a 15-year-old named Hisu. He recounted the tale to us as we sat in his mother's kitchen and drank some strong tea. The boy's hands had trembled as he spoke, and he seemed on the verge of tears as he retold his story. My parents are at the hospital with Ichi, praying that he will recover. He was supposed to go to university this year, but now it's unlikely that he will ever recover. The kid's English was pretty good, but when Travis asked if he wanted to come with us, I didn't need words to read the terror on his face. I haven't been back since the incident. I won't go near it again. A lot of kids in the village won't go there anymore either, not after what happened to Ichi. He wished us luck and said that he would pray for our return. Standing outside the grungy arcade, I didn't see what all the fuss was about. The facade was filthy, ivy hanging from the canopy, and bars installed over the dingy windows. The dust on the windows looked like you could have written in it, and the spiderwebs in the corners looked old enough to have seen the Reagan administration. The door was a black, gaping mouth with a roll-down shutter that would lock at night. As we stood, I could hear the beeps and plinks from inside, the familiar sounds of Pac-Man and Street Fighter, and the sounds were comforting somehow. Even in this foreign land, the sounds of familiar games could bring me comfort. "So, got everything hooked up?" I asked, going over his setup one more time. His glasses were set up with a pair of digital recorders that were damn near undetectable. As he recorded, the camera feed would be continuously uploading to the cloud. I could pick through the footage later and edit it into something usable for the channel. Since I couldn't come with him, he would have to record his events as he saw them. I was mostly on location to call the police if anything weird happened. A few local kids may not pique the police's interest, but an American tourist with 500,000 sub count might make them a little more willing to investigate this place. It made me feel like a real reporter, working in the field to expose the truth. How quickly we forget that those people, too, can die. "It's as ready as it'll ever be. Let's see if there's anything to see," Travis said, a big grin spread across his face. We walked into the building that was awash with blinking lights and a cacophony of sounds. Children of all ages were hunkered over the blinking machines. Others were running around and laughing as they tried to find their favorite games. I could hear the wooden chunk of a skee-ball machine, the metallic clink of an air hockey table as the puck zipped around the smooth surface, the hollow boom of a shooting game, and the pop tunes of Dance Dance Revolution. The owner had a modest collection of classic arcade cabinets as well, and even at a glance, I could tell that this was a place that made money. Standing behind the counter, looming like a monster amidst the brightly colored prizes and flashing signs, was a giant, grinning man. He was easily 7 feet tall, and nearly as wide. He had an oily mustache that sat under a bulbous, greasy nose, and his eyes were like a mean-spirited pig that loves to snap at curious children. He reminded me of a picture book I had owned as a child, Puss in Boots, and how the ogre had made me feel scared. The warty ogre had sat on his cushion in his beautiful clothes and looked down at the cat as it wove its lies. Even as a child, I had thought the look made him look menacing. It was a look that said plainly The cat was in danger of being devoured. The man spoke to Travis in what I assumed was Japanese, a language I was not familiar with, and Travis spoke back to him with relative ease. The man smiled, showing several blackened teeth, and spoke to Travis in English, though this English sounded more like European than actual American English. "Ah, an American. So word of my special game has spread that far, eh?" "Infamy, more like it," Travis said. The man's smile looked a little off after that. "You'll need to sign a waiver if you'd like to play. After the last incident, I really must protect myself from further accusations." Travis scanned the document, looking for traps, and I asked the owner about the game. "What is it that seems to be making your customers react so badly?" "Well, there are the usual rumors that surround the game. The creator died, his spirit haunts the game is actually a portal to hell. Many strange rumors surround my little shop, but I can assure you that the game is just a regular game, nothing special that need elicit such reactions." Travis had finished signing the paperwork and was ready to see this game. "Only one of you at a time, boys. You'll have to wait out here," he said, pointing a dirty finger at me as Travis stepped behind the counter. The last time I saw Travis, he flashed me a peace sign and smiled with a big grin. "See you on the other side," he intoned. Then he disappeared into the shadowy back room as I remained in the world of flashing lights and familiar sounds. I turned away from the counter and found myself drawn by the brightly colored lights and the machine's electronic blare. I spent some time playing familiar games: Tekken, Marvel vs. Capcom, Time Crisis 2, House of the Dead. I took a spin at Initial D, a very intuitive racing game, and had my ass handed to me by a local kid at Street Fighter 2. These same kids then talked me into playing Dance Dance Revolution with them, and I had a blast as I tripped along to several of the fast and bubbly songs they picked. I lost track of time for a while, enjoying myself, enjoying the company of kids half my age who didn't speak a word of my language. When a shadow fell across us, though, their smiling faces curdled and they scattered like birds. I looked up from some unpronounceable game that hadn't made it to America and found the owner standing over me, two large men flanking him. He looked angry, his face wooden yet still smiling, and he told me to get my things and leave. I was shocked. Was he kicking me out? Had I violated some unknown rule? I had easily spent $50 in this place, and the idea that he was here to pull me out made no sense. I'm here with my friend, the one in the back. I'll leave when he finishes his... He's gone. He broke a costly machine and left out the back. Now I want you gone too, before I call the authorities. Wait, I stammered. Which way did he go? I'm a stranger here. I don't know any... But it seemed they weren't here to negotiate with me. The two large men had me under the arms in a heartbeat, and before I knew it, I was half drugged, half carried from the shop. They deposited me onto the sidewalk with a distinct lack of grace, and the owner stood in the doorway as I got up and stood with confusion. "You and your friend are banned. Leave the premises before I call the authorities," he said, evenly, before slamming the shutter down in my face. That's how I came to be outside the dingy shop without Travis, half a world from home with no clue how to get back. I had no choice but to walk to the Hisawa residence. He was the only person I knew in Tamanoru, and without knowing how to speak the language, I was practically helpless. Hisawa spoke English, Hisawa knew the area, and Hisawa knew the people that lived in the village. Hopefully one of them could help me find Travis, and I could get him through whatever was going on so we could get home. Also, Hisawa had a computer, which I would need to find Travis. Travis had gone to the back wearing the glasses. The camera on those glasses had been uploading to the cloud for the past 5 hours. If I could link up with the cloud, I could watch the video he had uploaded and get some ideas of where he was going. That would allow me to find him and get us both back home. If only it had been that easy. Hisawa, it turned out, wasn't home. His house was locked up, and the lights inside were dark. He had probably gone to see his brother in the hospital, and as dusk began to set, I made my way back into town. I was looking for somewhere, anywhere with Wi-Fi, to access the videos on my phone. It wouldn't be as stable as accessing them from a dedicated connection, but if it helped me find Travis, I didn't care how I went about it. It was getting dark, and I started to worry that I wouldn't find him until morning. When the familiar arches of a McDonald's came into view, I breathed a sigh of relief. They had Wi-Fi, and after purchasing some food, I was pretty hungry after not eating all day, I plopped down in a booth near the back wall and made my way into the file program. The file was there, but the program had stopped updating about 20 minutes ago. That was weird, but if he had wandered off the signal range, it could be that the program couldn't get a connection anymore. I clicked on the file and got 6 hours worth of video. I gasped. Surely I hadn't been in the arcade that long. It didn't feel like I had been in there any time, but my stomach was empty, and I had been known to lose track of time when I was playing games. I ate as the file finished downloading. I had finished my food when a message popped up that the files were ready to view. The video began as we walked on the sidewalk. I heard myself asked if the equipment was working okay. We walked inside, spoke with the owner, and I could hear myself asking questions as Travis looked over the paperwork. He signed, followed the guy into the back, and turned suddenly to treat me to a last look at my worried face. "See you on the other side," he intoned, before turning back and walking into the dim back room. He walked past a line of overstuffed shelves to a hallway with several closed doors. Some of the doors had shadow lights beneath them, shadowy forms doing God knew what, but the man led him to a particular door and opened it with a key. Inside was a sit-down cabinet similar to the old joystick arcade games. The cabinet filled the room, and there was barely enough room to enter as Travis stepped inside. "When you're done, lock the door as you leave," the man said, his almost European tone still hanging over his voice, not like the angry one I had gotten as he threw me on the sidewalk. Then he closed the door, and Travis was alone with the softly glowing screen. The screen was large, 50 inches at least, and the words "Your Corner of Hell" pulsated across it. Travis looked for a coin slot and found none. He sat down and grasped the joystick, a single piece of plastic with no buttons or triggers. He looked around for a start button. Travis spoke to the audience, telling them that this was the game that had garnered all the hype, and he was going to see what all the fuss was about. He had just said something about not finding a start button when the screen emitted an odd static noise and bathed the room in a harsh white light. Travis snapped his eyes forward, and I had to shield my own eyes against the bright intrusion. Then the screen darkened, and Travis was staring at a bleak landscape of reds and blacks. He moved the joystick, the screen panning around, and it became apparent that he was in a cave. Travis praised the graphics, walking up to the wall and inspecting the textures. I had to admit, it was very impressive. The renderings were far beyond anything the cabinet or the screen should have been capable of. For a second, I could swear the pictures on the console were real-time. The cave walls were made of dark stone with veins of red that wound through them in arteries. The walls pulsated and moved oddly, and when he turned, there was a dim light coming from the end of the tunnel behind him. Shapes moved in that light, strangely proportioned shapes, and Travis seemed hesitant to go in that direction. After a few seconds of half-heartedly looking around, though, he discovered that this was the only route and moved his character down the tunnel. Kind of basic for a game with such well-defined graphics, but whatever, Travis grumbled as he moved up the pulsating tunnel, viewing the weird rocks around him. I heard him gasp when the tunnel roof gave way to the sky, and my own breath stuck in my throat at the sight. The sky was a deep red, the red of heart's blood, and as he took it all in, I could see bodies falling from it ceaselessly. They fell close, they fell far away, and the ones that fell close to the cave splattered on the ground with sickening realism. Travis jumped back, startled as the realistic gore splattered across the ground, and I heard him use a word that would have definitely got us demonetized if I wasn't going to edit it out later. I reached for my earbuds as a family lumbered past on their way to the bathroom, the squelching making my stomach flip over a little as it erupted again and again. I didn't want anyone to hear these sounds. Hell, I didn't want to listen to these sounds when it came right down to it. As I slipped my earbuds in, I heard Travis mumbling about the level of gore as a body landed a few feet from him and burst like an overripe fruit. He seemed more intrigued than angry, though. Then, as Travis watched the body, it got up. Its limbs popped grotesquely back into place, and the naked humanoid, bald and sexless, got up and stumbled away from the site of its landing. It ignored Travis, stumbling across the dark sand that covered the ground. I could hear Travis breathing hard as he watched, and after some hesitation, he followed it. It stumbled across the sand, jumping as the hot sand burned its feet, and as it traveled away from the cave, Travis could see it joining groups of other battered bodies. They didn't speak. They grouped out of pure instinct and shuffled along as the black sand gave way to sluggish rivers of living fire. The group seemed to shy away from the fire, and I really couldn't blame them. Something seemed to be moving within the flames, and the group of bodies seemed to know that it was something that wanted to hurt them. Travis followed them, but never joined their group. He seemed to understand that these skittish creatures, humans or not, would be a target for whatever lived here, and their group would attract a lot of attention. As if to prove that point, one of them strayed a little too close to the fire and was ensnared by an arm of living flame that dragged it into the fiery river. The group looked after him, marking his departure, but they neither mourned him or slowed. They kept moving, and I could see other groups moving similarly as Travis used the joystick to look around. "What in the hell is going on with this game?" Travis asked as he followed the group at a safe distance. Am I supposed to follow them? Am I supposed to strike out on my own? I don't get the point here. He decided to follow them, despite their lack of direction, and as they neared a field of sharp black grass, I saw a creature jump out to challenge them. He was average height, his skin a deep maroon, and somehow he reminded me of the shopkeeper at the arcade. He was as wide as he was tall, and he looked at the group with a broad smile on his face. It was a distinctly gobble-you-up sort of smile. It spoke to them in a strange language, completely ignoring Travis as he moved in for a closer look, and some of the creatures stepped forward hesitantly to stand near him. The rest stood their ground, unsure of the stranger or whatever he was offering. It didn't matter. The nets came flying from the grass then, and the creatures yelled in a very human way as they were captured. Some tried to flee, others were resigned to their fate, but none of them tried to fight back. They were sheep, and soon they would be rounded up and taken to wherever it was they were bound. They made piteous noises as the nets fell over them, which seemed to push Travis to action. Travis rushed at the creatures, yelling at them to get the hell away, but since he possessed no weapons, he attempted to run his body into them and stop them from taking the struggling humanoids. He bumped the creatures, foundering against them, and the creatures took no more notice of him than an ant. They had the group rounded up in no time, and when they walked into the grass with their prize, Travis followed them into that sea of blackness. Maybe I'm supposed to follow them, he said, his voice a little frantic. Maybe that's my goal? He moved into the grass like a blind man, losing the creatures almost at once. When he came out, he was alone in a dark world of black sand and endless miles. He traveled into the emptiness, unsure of where he was going. He moved aimlessly, the hellscape never changing, and the falling bodies never ceasing. Travis didn't follow them anymore, though. He seemed to think it was pointless, and as he moved deeper in, I could hear his breathing becoming frantic and unsure. The game was presenting him nothing but a vast world to explore, but he seemed unable to interact with it or alter it. There were no trees to punch, no shelters to make, no goals to accomplish, and the only constant seemed to be the moans of the falling bodies or the distant screams of the unseen. The screams would erupt distantly, sending Travis turning frantically in that direction before returning to his chosen path. He had seen no one but the creatures and the humanoids they hunted, and he was becoming a little paranoid of the big open landscape. Travis began his journey into emptiness with some commentary on the landscape, the graphics, and the game's strangeness. The farther he went into the wasteland, the more addled he seemed to become. He talked less to the audience and more to himself. At first it was just idle talk, wondering if he was going the right way or not, but slowly his speech began to descend into mumbling. The screams were starting to get to him, and I was worried that he might be losing it as his camera panned around for what felt like the 1,000th time. I fast-forwarded a little bit. His trip through the wasteland made up almost 4 hours of the total video. When he had stopped in the desert, staring at a fixed point for several minutes, I started the video and returned to his heavy, labored breathing as he stared into the distance. He sounded ragged, as though he had been slogging for hours for real, and he just stared into the distance for no reason, intense on something. Suddenly he ran towards whatever he was seeing. The camera footage was secondhand, and I leaned in as the McDonald's crowd bustled around me, trying to see what he was seeing. Whatever it was had excited him. Whatever it was had piqued his curiosity. He ran like a man possessed, stumbling in the game as he made his way over the shifting sands towards whatever lay beyond. When the first tree of the grove came into view, I thought I knew what he had seen. When I saw what was hanging from the tree, I wondered why he was in such a hurry to get to them. The grove of dark and twisted trees came looming up from the spinning air. They weren't tall, maybe 8 feet, but each of them bore a length of rope that swung from its branches. At the end of each rope was a sexless humanoid. As Travis got close, I could see the purple bruises around their necks and the boneless way they hung from the dead trees. The grove was nothing but these grotesque wind chimes, and Travis seemed less eager as he walked into it. When the first one started screaming, I cried out right along with Travis. It came as a sudden eruption in my right ear, and my sudden yelp made a couple across from me frown and look at me oddly. I apologized, turning back to the video to see Travis studying the poor creature as it twisted on the noose. It grabbed at him, speaking in a strange language that might have been English once. It held its arms out to him, pleading for relief, or for release, or something, and Travis backed away before bolting. The forest came alive then, the tortured screams and shaking trees erupting into a cacophony and fury, and Travis began to run frantically amidst the swinging horrors. He fell suddenly, tripping over a root, and when he looked up, I heard him sob audibly as his eyes fell on a single, withered humanoid. It might have once been female, but as it was, its chest was flat, its crotch smooth, and its head hairless and lumpy. As it lifted its searching, begging face to him, I could see a single half-moon scar on its cheek. She screamed and wailed just as the others had, but there was a deep longing for release in her eyes. She begged him with her eyes, cried at him with her wailing mouth, and Travis could do nothing but stare at her as she wailed into the void. "Mom?" he breathed, his voice shaky. Travis had lost his mom last year to cancer. I had known her all my life. She had made Travis and I snacks after school, drove us places in our teens, and Travis had always been so close with her that she became like a second mother to me. How many times had I seen that scar on her cheek and wondered how she'd gotten it? Her face was still as sunken as it had been in the hospital as she lay dying, and as that screaming face stared back at Travis, I saw him snap like an over-tightened guitar string. His fists came up and he slammed them into the screen. The cabinet shook, the image shivering, but Travis was far from satisfied. He slammed his fists, he kicked his booted feet, and he screamed like a wild man as the cabinet jerked and bent under his assault. How had I not heard him? How had I been feet away, having the time of my life, while my best friend had gone through the worst trauma of his? How had I not heard him screaming? How had I not heard his fury? As the cabinet sparked and broke, I could hear him screaming the same thing again and again, and it broke my heart to hear the pain in it. "Mom! Mom! Mom! Mom!" The door swung open, and the arcade owner screamed at him, wanting to know what he was doing. Travis rushed the man, his smile now an angry gnash of teeth, and shoved him out of the way as he made a break for the back room. He turned to look at the store owner, and for just a moment, I could see the faces of those creatures that had captured the humanoids. His gnash of teeth looked like the beast's frozen grin, and I could almost hear Travis coming to the same conclusion. He bolted for the back door, and I saw him run out into the dingy alley. He looked around frantically, people on the street staring in mistrust, before taking a left turn and heading in the opposite direction we had come. He ran up the streets of Tomanaru, a stranger in a strange land, and the people on the street gave him a wide berth. He was frantic, moving like a wild animal, and when he stopped suddenly, I leaned in close to see what he was looking at. He stared, seeming to stare at his reflection in the window across the street, and the people diverted around him as he just sat there, staring. I could see his small reflection in the glass, and he looked haggard, crazed even, but his face was filled with that unhinged understanding that you sometimes see in the mentally ill. "Mom," he whispered, and without warning, he rushed across the street with the blare of car horns following him. He ran up the street, never slowing, and when he came to a familiar train station, I wondered what he meant to do. He kept calling for his mother, chasing her ghost or something else that only he could see, as people moved out of his way like he might be contagious. He ran through the platform, the rustic wooden benches looking spooky in the near dark, and the people in the loading area cried out as he jumped down onto the track. I wanted to turn away, fearing what would happen next, but I owed it to him to see his end. The train came rolling up, blowing its whistle. He ran towards it, shouting her name. "Mom! Mom!" The train whistle blared, and the people on the platform screamed. "Mom! Mom!" The train lights rolled in close, a blinding corona of light in the eyes of the camera. "Mom!" Everything went white, and then suddenly dark as the video ended. I sat back, stunned, unsure of what I had seen or what I should do. My best friend was dead, a victim of this game that I still don't understand. I watched it secondhand, so maybe it doesn't have the same effect on me, but that's little comfort in the face of my friend's violent departure from life. I have nothing now. I haven't just lost my friend, I've lost my job and my means of returning home. Travis had our tickets in his bag. He had our hotel keys in his pocket. And I'm sitting on the sidewalk of the closed McDonald's now, unsure how to proceed. I don't know what Travis saw in his last minutes of life, but I pray it wasn't his shrieking mother that hung from the skeletal tree of that damned game. All I can do is tell my story and hope that some of you will have answers. All I can do is warn you not to play this game, as enticing as it may seem. Travis would want his death to mean something. He would want his sacrifice to be more than just another Let's Play or a creepypasta. I pray that if the land in that game is real, Travis didn't become one of those falling things that came from the sky. If there is a God, I pray that he took him somewhere better.